A sensation is sweeping through Russia. Rats among their own. Putin is removing Chief of the General Staff Gerasimov. The purge has begun. The dictator has found himself trapped. Russian youth are rising up in rebellion against the dictatorship. Maidans are flaring up in different cities at this very moment. Finally, Russia's economy is running on empty, Zelensky announced. This can no longer be hidden. Oil refineries are starting to explode from within. Drones have started the countdown. A massive rout. Russians won't be getting any gas either. Wow, the fuel sector. The crisis has reached its peak. Instead of cars, now there are horse-drawn carts. The realities of life in Russia are astonishing. Watch until the end to find out more about this. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Darina Hotsakalo, bringing you the latest events. A rupture is brewing. A purge of Russia's top leadership is imminent. Everyone is betraying Putin one after another. General Gerasimov is hanging by a thread. Putin is preparing to remove the military command due to failures at the front. Partisans have obtained exclusive information.
The Kremlin is extremely dissatisfied with his work and the falsified reports from the front. Putin has set a deadline for Gerasimov to capture Pokrovsk by mid-November. This order is the general's last chance to keep his position.
According to the AT movement, candidates to replace Gerasimov are already being discussed in Putin's inner circle. The most likely successor is said to be Colonel General Viktor Poznikier, who has a reputation as a controllable and more loyal officer to the Kremlin. Meanwhile, the youth uprising against Putin's dictatorship is only gaining momentum with each passing day. A good Russian singer, Naoko, who performed anti-war and anti-Putin songs in St. Petersburg and nearly gathered crowds like on the Maidan. On the streets of the city in Petersburg, followers have emerged. Watching. At least 3 musicians have been detained and are being sent to the first police department. The local authorities are getting nervous. The hot news is reaching Putin as well. Z channels sense something is wrong and the propagandists are starting to whine. It's striking how much the Russian authorities are afraid of children and words. What can I say? It seems Putin is now afraid of absolutely everything and the Kremlin is on the verge of exploding. The bunker dictator, who for years seemed all-powerful, now sees conspiracies everywhere. His associates are turning away, generals are whispering about a new day without him, and the elites are quietly packing their bags. A real storm is brewing within the Kremlin walls. Putin nervously rushes between offices, ordering purges and inspections, but it's already too late. The countdown has begun. Is this the moment everyone was afraid to talk about? Will the bunker leader's throne fall in the very near future? All this coming up in just a moment. For almost a quarter of a century, Vladimir Putin has been building a system of personal power in Russia, a totalitarian state where any dissent is punished to instill fear and cement the regime. But today, this monolith is starting to crack. The Russian dictator is in a panic, terrified of losing his grip on power over Russia. As the Telegraph reports, the bunker dweller is meticulously guarding his regime against any threats. Recently, the FSB accused Mikhail Khodorkovsky and 22 other members of the Russian anti-war committee of preparing a coup d'etat. According to the security service, the organization is allegedly planning a violent seizure of power and the overthrow of the constitutional order.
This tells us that the Kremlin is paranoid. Putin is looking for enemies in an attempt to strengthen his regime. John Herbst, Senior Director of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council and former US Ambassador to Ukraine.
After spending 10 years in a Siberian prison, Khodorkovsky was released in 2013 and fled to Europe, where in 2022 he founded the Anti-War Committee. In an interview with The Telegraph, he stated that the FSB's accusations reflect the Kremlin's fear of the future and the issue of power transfer.
What do we have in Russia? A prime minister who was not elected by anyone, but appointed by Putin. Courts appointed by Putin. Parliament, a body whose seats were filled as a result of rigged elections, and in whose legitimacy no one believes. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Russian entrepreneur and publicist.
They couldn't care less about the liberals who fled after being politically castrated. They're not afraid at all. They're not afraid of each other. Of the same predators, those who circle around you, look you in the eye every day, and swear loyalty. These people can do it, and Putin knows this perfectly well. And the Prigozhin media, even if it was just a show, clearly demonstrated that no one will defend him. Neither the National Guard, nor the police, nor the rank and file, nor the generals, no one cares, no one gives a damn. And neither does Putin. And
Indeed, fear becomes the key word. The dictator is cornered, and the economic situation only heightens the anxiety. Russia's Minister of Economy, Maxim Reshetnikov, has admitted that the country is on the brink of recession. The banking system is suffocating under the debts of defense enterprises. According to Harvard analyst Craig Kennedy, $190 billion in loans have been issued to defense industry companies without guarantees. And now this bubble could burst at any moment. Moreover, Ukrainian drones have destroyed more than half of Russia's oil refineries, forcing the country into huge lines. There are fuel shortages at gas stations, and the new sanctions over Akano have only made it worse. A blow. Donald Trump has imposed the toughest restrictions since the start of the war. The giants Rosneft and Lukoil have come under fire. Now China and India are reducing their purchases of Russian oil. Almost 3 million barrels per day are at risk. And along with them, half of the Kremlin's income. But Putin fears not only internal threats, but also external ones. The dictator is amassing an ever larger air defense system around the Kremlin. There are already 5 layers of defense around the capital. Pantsir S-300 and S-400 systems are being brought in from all regions. Now it's official. Strikes by Ukrainian defense forces on oil refining facilities deep inside Russia have dealt a significant blow to the aggressor's economy. As a result of these attacks, Russia has lost over 20% of its oil refining capacity and up to 27% of its fuel production. Volodymyr Zelensky has declared a triumph.
We believe that the Russians have lost more than 20% of their oil refining capacity, about 20 to 27% of their fuel. And that's why there were lines. There's a problem there.
Shock. An irreversible process has been set in motion. Soon, Russian oil refineries will start exploding from the inside even before Ukrainian drones strike.
Boom! Oh, look at that smoke. Got it.
This can no longer be hidden. Russian economic analyst Vyacheslav Shiryayev, in a comment to Oboz Revatel, made a sharp statement about the future of Russia's oil lifeline, which is already in a semi-conscious state today.
This is an abnormal mode for oil refining. At some point, it will start making itself known simply through breakdowns and explosions, some of which will have nothing to do with Ukrainian drones anymore.
Russia's facilities are running at full capacity. No repairs, no renovations. Round the clock just to create the appearance that the situation is under control. Nevertheless, no matter how much Putin tries to hide it, the sanctions are also taking a toll on Russian greatness. The company Yatek has officially shut down its large-scale Yakutsk LNG project. The plans were ambitious to produce up to 18 million tons of liquefied gas annually. But the ambitious idea remained only on paper. What a mess.
When sanctions don't work, there's simply no equipment, no shipyards, no partners, and nothing to export. Russia is heroically returning to the cave with a gas torch.
It seems that for the Kremlin, even gas has stopped shining. But really, what is there to be surprised about? Russian industry is suffocating. Factories are at a standstill, once successful plants are shutting down, and the country is sliding into an economic abyss. Putin stubbornly pretends that the situation is under control, but the reality is different. The war and sanctions have completely exhausted the Kremlin. The momentum is gone and there are no prospects. Will the Kremlin ever be able to recover? We'll talk about that in just a moment. Resources are stretched to the limit, and claims about the stability of the Russian economy don't hold up to the facts.
There's simply no other way to describe it. Well, this isn't our choice. We don't want things to develop this way.
Putin is trying to bluff and save face by creating an illusion of success. But it's all in vain. Russia's economy is rapidly going downhill. Almost 80% of the country's industry has fallen into recession.
When we talk about separate sectors, it means that production in these sectors, compared to the same period we usually use for comparison, typically the previous year, is getting worse. In other words, it's not just stagnation, it's deterioration. And so a recession is precisely this kind of deterioration, when you're in the negative. And when a recession becomes prolonged, meaning it's not just 1 year, but say 3 or 4 years of decline, then it's no longer a recession, it's a depression.
By the end of September, overall industrial production growth in Russia had slowed to 0.3% year-on-year. That's almost 19 times less than...
This is the final one, the very last in the sequence, marking the end of everything that came before it. This year, as expected indeed. And when you produce less, there you have it, a recession, a negative compared to the previous period.
The decline is especially pronounced in those civilian sectors that were supposed to replace the products of foreign companies which left Russia after the start of the full-scale war. This is
the collapse of import substitution, when the plan was, let's replace everything, but to replace everything, you have to produce what you'll use as a substitute. And if you don't produce it, then what will you use to substitute? So how are you going to... Of course, it's pointless to engage in this substitution with imported products when you're not producing anything yourself. That is, obviously, any decline in the economy means that goods are not being produced. And if they're not being produced, then accordingly, there's no point in keeping the people who produce them. And that's unemployment. And unemployment is always an unpleasant situation.
In fact, the domestic market is deprived of consumer goods, and Russian factories are unable to fill the shortage.
It even seemed that the military sector, or at least part of the military sector, is the production of armaments. In September of this year, in September of last year, it was 1.3% in Russia. So even the production of armaments is already in the negative. What can we say about the rest of the economy, which is supposedly performing better?
The central bank has predicted that Russia could face its most significant economic downturn since the 1990s if sanctions are further tightened. According to their assessment, the economic situation may deteriorate considerably, potentially leading to a prolonged period of hardship similar to what was experienced during the post-Soviet era. If the current circumstances do not improve or stabilize, then by the year 2026,
the Kremlin, which is the executive branch of the Russian government, could lose as much as $108 billion in export revenues. Export revenues are the money a country earns by selling goods and services to other countries. This potential loss would represent a significant decrease in the Russian government's income from international trade. Russian, also known as Ruski Yazyk in its native form, is an East Slavic language primarily spoken in Russia and in several countries that were once part of the Soviet Union. It is written using the Cyrillic alphabet and is one of the most widely spoken languages in the world.
Sberbank has started mass layoffs after Gazprom. In the first quarter, the staff of the largest bank, which holds half of all individual deposits, decreased by 8,600 employees.
That is, these are people responsible for this area, but they are not actually doing anything. And since they are not doing anything, I mean, what's the point of paying them a salary? So they are being laid off. That's why the layoffs of people are a demonstration that there is no longer a need for those economic functions that Sberbank provides. And accordingly, these people are being cut, but this is just one of many examples.
That's the reality. Only Putin is trying to hide all of this, but there's nowhere left to hide anymore. The economy is cracking, the country is losing money.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Fuel panic in Russia is overflowing. This is a complete fiasco for Putin. Fuel is running out, prices are skyrocketing, and even the biggest propaganda stories can't hide the failure. Russia, which used to boast of its might, is now brought to its knees by a simple need for gasoline. Will the Kremlin be able to fix the situation, or will it end up forcing Russians to switch to horses? We'll find out in just a moment.
An absolute anti-record for Putin. Cars in Russia are ceasing to be a means of transportation and are turning into a luxury item. After all, it is becoming increasingly difficult for Russian residents to fuel their iron horses. Despite the fact that the Kremlin extracts an enormous amount of oil, the country is facing a shortage of gasoline and diesel fuel.
As funny as it is in a country where it used to be a gas station and indeed a raw materials appendage of China, a pipeline economy, and now it can't even provide its own population and businesses with that very oil and petroleum products.
The main culprit behind the catastrophic fuel shortage across the border has been the Ukrainian armed forces and their precision strikes on the occupiers' oil refining infrastructure. By the end of September, at least 38% of oil refinery capacities across Russia were idle. Primary oil processing, that's 338,000 tons per day. For the former gas station country, this is a colossal market collapse. Recently, the fuel shortage has become seriously felt even at the front lines. At ordinary Russian gas stations, you won't find 95 octane in most regions, even during the day with a flashlight. In
particular, at certain gas stations, they have sometimes started to limit the amount of fuel sold to one person at a time, somewhere up to 20 liters, somewhere up to 30 liters. They've started to ration sales. And at other gas stations in certain regions of Russia, they sometimes completely stopped selling certain types of fuel. For example, in some places there was no 92 octane gasoline available, in others there was no 95, and so on. At the same time, at small independent private gas stations that are not part of the so-called vertically integrated oil companies, there was a sharp increase in fuel prices.
the recent situation in the country has only made things worse. Along with the shortage at gas stations came sky-high prices. This summer, gasoline and diesel have increased in price in Russia by a good 15 to 20%. And starting from autumn, the price tags on gas station signs across the border are changing almost daily, each time adding 1 or 2 rubles to the cost of fuel. But even such an increase is not enough to cover the expenses of Russian oil refineries, which are now constantly under attack from Ukrainian drones.
The scale of the shortage is such that this is just a desperate attempt. These are blows to the pockets of oil workers, to oil companies that are already struggling, whose profits are collapsing and who are becoming unprofitable, trying at least somehow to supply the domestic market.
Things are even worse for Russian oil traders on foreign markets than they are on the domestic market. If previously the state compensated for the price difference through exports, today almost no one in Europe is buying Russian oil. So there's no longer any reason to expect cheap gasoline within Russia itself.
There's a major problem with fuel, and the crisis will only continue to grow. Accordingly, oil producers can't make money on external markets because the ruble is weak and oil prices are falling. Right now, Russian oil is at $55 to $57. That's the price per barrel, taking into account all the discounts and markdowns from the GPRMTU. So now it turns out that oil producers are going to the government with outstretched hands, asking for help and lower taxes. They're asking to reduce met rates, export duties, excise taxes, but the authorities themselves can't do this. Their budget is collapsing. There's a hole in the budget.
There's nothing left for the Russian economy to patch up that hole. As a result, the Kremlin couldn't come up with anything better than to announce the start of fuel imports into the country, while simultaneously halting all exports of gasoline and diesel from Russia. In other words,
they decided to import gasoline. So Putin insisted, saying that Russia would not be a gas station, not a gas station country. I think that's a real killer line. It's worth noting directly that now Russia will be buying gasoline. How can you not recall Churchill, who said that when the USSR starts buying wheat, that's when it will come to an end? So roughly speaking, when Putin's Russia starts buying gasoline, after some time it will come to an end, just like the USSR once did.
Helping Russia come to an end through actions, the Ukrainian authorities have also actively taken this up. In parallel with drone attacks on oil refineries, Kyiv is striking painful blows to Putin's economy on the diplomatic front.
If Ukraine synchronizes its strategy to reduce Russia's resource base together with its allies, together with Europe, America, Japan, and so on, sanctions will be determined very quickly. And even South Korea and Singapore will simply be afraid. Supplying gasoline to Russia so as not to fall under sanctions.
In such a hopeless situation, the Kremlin is grasping at the last straw. Disregarding all environmental regulations, the government has practically legalized counterfeit goods, hoping that at least this will saturate the Russian gasoline market. However, analysts assure that such a decision will, on the contrary, drive the final nail into the coffin of oil refining in the Russian Federation.
The authorities have decided to fight the gasoline shortage with methods that choke people and ruin car engines. Deputy Prime Minister Novak proposed to reintroduce a special gasoline additive for 6 months, which had been banned back in 2016. With its help, they want to increase gasoline production, but there is a catch. This additive has a negative impact on the environment, damages the condition of cars, and increases the retention of oxides. Nitrogen in the exhaust settles in the air at a height of 60 centimeters above the ground. It is dangerous for people to inhale these fumes. Symptoms of poisoning include slowed reactions, suffocation, and bluish discoloration of the hands and ears. And
such a surrogate with toxic additives will instantly turn your engine into a pile of scrap metal. After just 6 months of driving on such fuel, the car will become unusable, just like all Russian public transport. Then, without proper gasoline or diesel, the entire multi-million population of the country will be forced to switch to good old horse-drawn carts.
How do you assess the scale of the catastrophe in Russia? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button under the video, and don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come. See you soon.